Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to talk about some of the changes coming up for healers across the board as we're getting the first of our Guardians of the Dream 10.2 information. So we're going to be going over both the tier sets and some of the class changes and how they're going to be feeling and what some of the expectations are going forward. For preservation, to get us started, Spirit Bloom's healing is increased by 25%, Living Flame by 20%, Burden Embrace by 35%, so a lot of direct healing, as you can see. Resonating Sphere is giving you less echoes now, only 3 instead of the 5 that you had before. Cycle of Life is accumulating only 10% of your healing instead over 8 seconds instead of the 10. And when it comes to the tier set bonuses that you're going to have on hand, your Empower spells are casting Living Flames at enemies or allies struck at 40% effectiveness, which is also going to mean you're going to be getting more Essence Bursts to be able to churn out. And those Living Flames have a chance to apply Echoes at 100% effectiveness on allies healed or nearby allies who don't already have Echo upon them. It's kind of a weird additional tier set bonus, or kind of like a weird change that they're having of doing something sort of very similar of playing around your Echo gameplay, but just in a different fashion. I don't mind it too terribly much. I haven't been playing my Preservation Evoker as much in raids, but when I have, especially with the current tier set, I always felt like I had a glut of Essence Burst, which did feel really satisfying. And when you're looking at it through the lens of losing like the old tier set bonus, you can see why they're having some of the Spirit Bloom casts that you're having on your allies. So that's going to be pretty hyped to be able to see. And I was honestly kind of expecting more nerfs to be able to come in for preservation, as if it's like time had kind of like ended being the golden child of the expansion. But I don't think that's going to be happening at the moment. And sometimes I kind of feel like less is more when it comes to preservation, of like not taking away some certain tools that they already have on hand, just sort of giving them a different way to churn out healing at a high level. So it's exciting to be able to see that that's probably still going to continue. I personally read when they were talking about like looking into large cooldowns, I really thought something was going to happen with Rewind, and I was almost surprised that it didn't. So I think in a lot of cases, less is more when it comes to Preservation Evoker. For Holy Paladin, once again, oh man, since 10.1.5, Holy Paladin's been taking shots. All healing is reduced by 3%. I actually can't fathom why that's happening, since they're not dominant in raids, not dominant in raid healing, and their M+ out healing is more based off having like fat cooldowns for everything. But their Holy Light healing is increased by 40%, and their Flash healing has been increased by 30%. Daybreak restores 2,000 mana per Glimmer instead of 3,000. Reclamation, I think this is also a huge one, of having only 12% Crusader Strike and Holy Shock mana cost restoration instead of the 15%. Sort of attacking Holy Paladin's mana again. And also just like artificially slowing down how they play. I really enjoy how Paladin can just be like dealing damage and healing and using instant cast spells, but when you have to plant your feet and sit there and just cast, it is incredibly slow and just sort of frustrating really to do. It feels like they're making you cast, or going to force you to cast so that you'll be able to play around your mana, and it's just kind of a frustrating way to play it. I do wish that there was some kind of way to deal with the glut of resources that you have, because you're getting so much holy power since the 10.1.5 rework, and it feels like your spenders are just not really valuable. I swear, if they had some kind of way with like an off GCD ability to like dump holy power in favor of like getting mana return or something like that, you'd probably see a lot of paladins using something like that so that they would not be forced to be casting all the time. I think having the idea that you need to be mindful of your mana is a really good goal to have, but when you do it in such a way that it inhibits your usual like flow of your gameplay, where you just like stop dealing damage, stop using Crusader Strikes to like save mana or some crazy janky stuff like that, it's just frustrating. I don't think that the solution for Holy Pallies is like, hey, go cast a bunch while you're sitting in melee, and maybe there's movement mechanics happening, or maybe there's something else happening, but also like super watch out for your mana. I almost feel like the glut of holy power resources that we've gotten since Daybreak, reduced cooldown on like Divine Toll, things like that, is giving you an opportunity to actually do something more with your spenders, or maybe even getting rid of your holy power. But I know that'd be super weird. I wouldn't even mind if they got rid of holy power and then instead gave cooldowns to your spenders and made them like actually really powerful. But since they're also reducing mana, why not just have something that you could be dumping your holy power, receiving mana in return, and sort of balancing out how you are utilizing your spenders to actually get something decent out of it. When it comes to the tier set, yeah, it's just like Glimmer Reloaded. You know, Glimmer dissipates, or when it dissipates or is refreshed, it creates a reverb on its target to heal an ally or damage an enemy. Multiple reverbs can overlap up to 3 times, so it's just kind of like, hey, if you shock people, you get more healing. You know, no surprise. The cooldown of Daybreak getting reduced by 15 seconds is kind of cool because then it aligns with the cooldown reduction that Divine Toll gets at the bottom of their class tree, so you can kind of just have them aligned again if you wanted to. Great, you know, no biggie. But again, I think there's just like this other opportunity that is present for Holy Paladin to be able to do more with their spenders, because if you're getting even more Daybreaks and even more high-value Holy Shocks all the time that are giving you more resources, there's already moments where you feel like you're glutted on your spenders already, and it doesn't feel good to be casting them all the time. And there doesn't really seem to be any solution to the problem of that design at the moment. And that's, I think Paladin should be very disappointed. For Priest, we're going to go over really quickly with Disc. I have an entire video dedicated to Disc, but I'll give a quick summation and everything in this one. If you'd like to see the longer explanation, I'll have the other video available on the channel as well. First and foremost, Power Infusion. Haste is reduced to 20% instead of 25%, and the duration is reduced to 15 seconds instead of the previous 20 seconds. It is proved to be too impactful due to how it stacks with cooldowns and specs that excel at dealing damage. Yeah, we know the story. So they're going to be reducing the duration and amplitude to balance it out for burst classes. But I honestly don't know why they're reducing the effectiveness of Power Infusion from Twins of the Sun Priestess. Like, why are they nerfing it for the priest themselves? Why not just be nerfing it for other players? Or why not just be making it personal? I don't know. Kind of strange under that one. Shadow Word Death, they've capped the amount of damage when it fails to kill a target. I really like this because Shadow Word Death damage was getting pretty insane. Tithe Evasion is now nerfed as well, so if Shadow Word Death doesn't kill a target, it will just deal 4% of your health to you instead of the 8% or even more or anything. And it also gets reduced by damage reduction. So few too many people got killed by Shadow Word Death, so now they're changing it. Master Spell cooldown is 2 minutes. This is actually ridiculous. And the fact that they're making it so that improved Master Spell in PvP is just barely affecting them. They have a 20-second health increase or something like, or 20-second cooldown increase, whereas Raiders and M+ers have a minute 15-second increase. This is super frustrating, especially because there was an entire season dedicated to abilities just being really good with Master Spell. And that's just frustrating, you know? Yeah, it does take away the advantage that healers have, or just the entire party has, with bursting. So it's also like their decision to make it so that it could be Master Spelled. I don't know, it's just a bit odd. So, I'm very frustrated by this when certain specs have really good value in a season, and it's based off of how a season is designed, and then they start hardcore nerfing it for that season, and then things return back to normal, and then you just have a nerfed ability. That's kind of my thought on it. It's very frustrating. You no longer have the improved Master Spell cast time in your talent tree, and instead you have the mental agility, where the mana cost to Purify and Master Spell and Dispel Magic are all reduced by a measly like 10%. Really weird. For Disc, like I said, I went over all these changes in a big video, but they have redesigned it so that Schism and Shadow Covenant are now baked in passive abilities. When you activate Mind Blast, it procs Schism. When you activate your Shadow Fiend or Mind Vendor, it procs Shadow Covenant. So you have the abilities still, but they're baked into other casts. Mind Blast has been made a cooldown as a result. Its damage has been increased. You no longer have 2 charges of it, but you're able to force proc buffs onto your penance. Inescapable Torment's damage has been increased to compensate for not having as many Mind Blast casts, and it can also be procced from penance. Inescapable Torment is now just a 1-pointer. Solace has been removed. Harsh Discipline is triggering off of your Radiances instead of your Smites, Mind Blast, and Solace, which is fantastic because you're force proccing Harsh Discipline by applying atonements rather than prepping with damage in advance of an event. So this is really, really good changes. Sanctuary is coming off of a BFA like Azerite trait, where if you smite, it's a like negative damage effect that it's absorbing from an enemy. So you stack up this debuff onto an enemy, and it absorbs damage they would have otherwise dealt to you, which is fantastic. Ultimate Penitence is an insane ability replacing Light's Wrath, where you ascend into the air and release a massive barrage of penance bolts. If you guys want to see it, it's in my Disc video. Super, super powerful, and it's like a 4-minute kind of oh shit cooldown, which a lot of this priest have been wanting for a long time. The penance bolts that you fire from the event don't give you cooldown reduction, but after it's over, your other penance bolts that you naturally are casting are reducing ultimate penance's cooldown. So that 4-minute cooldown can become about a 2.5-minute cooldown or so. And with the capstone, it's also going to emit an explosion of light to heal your allies and apply quick atonements onto them. So you can quickly apply atonements to everybody, ascend up into the air, unleash a barrage of penance bolts onto everybody, and just do a ton of damage. The damage and healing of penance is also increased. Barrier got a bit of a nerf, but I don't think that's too big of a problem. Atonement itself does get nerfed, but Atonement in 5-mans gets increased by 50%. So this is going to be fantastic for the spec. Flash healing is increased by 40%. Shield absorption is increased by 10%, and Divine Aegis is a 1-pointer. So some fantastic changes that are coming around for Disc. And when it comes to their set bonuses, Smite and Penance's damage is increased, and Smite is extending 1 active atonement by 2 seconds. For the 4 set bonus, Smite is having a 100% chance to cast an additional time during Shadow Covenant. So you are double stacking your Sanctuary, which is that negative damage effect. You're absorbing more damage that the enemy is going to deal to you before it happens. And you are also extending 2 atonements by 2 seconds instead of just the 1. Or you could kind of like double stack it as well with having like back-to-back smites, giving you 4 seconds of atonement extension, kind of like endless atonement extension onto targets. It's kind of not smart healing as it exists at the moment. It's kind of just extending whoever's atonement at the moment. If there were a way to control it, would be fantastic. We'll have to do a little bit more testing to see. For Holy Priest, Holy Word Serenity's healing has been increased by 30%. Flash Heal's healing has been increased by 40%. And notably, Holy Word Salvation has gotten nerfed, and the cooldown reduction is now 15 seconds per Holy Word instead of the 30 seconds for Serenity and Sanctify. Symbol's mana regen has gotten nerfed a little bit. I still hate that there's this missing mana garbage. Ugh. Symbol of Hope recovers 40 seconds of cooldowns for a major defensive, and it was 60. I actually don't think this is a big deal, because there's a lot of times where 40 seconds is more than enough, because you'll activate a minute or a minute and a half defensive cooldown, then you'll hit Symbol, take 40 seconds off, and then you're waiting 20, 40 seconds before another damage event happens, so your ability comes back anyway. I think that's totally fine. Sanctify only hits 5 allies instead of the previous 6. This was hitting like a massive truck, and you'll kind of see when we see the tier set bonuses as to a bit more of why this is. And D-Star and Halo healing has been nerfed a bit. But when it comes to the class sets, your Holy Word Serenity is applying a 14-second renew. Whoa! Holy Word Sanctify is applying 5-second renews to all the allies that it heals. Wow, what the? And then you see the 4 set, where Renew Healing is a chance to cause your next Sanctify or Serenity to not consume a charge when cast and cost 50% less mana, stacking up to 2 times. This does not give you a charge of your Holy Word. You need to already have that charge, and then when you spend it, it doesn't actually go on to cooldown. This is really a cool tier set, and I don't think it's quite as insane as some people are kind of lending on, where they just instantly want to go into just playing hardcore Renew build all the time. I don't think that's really the case, where you just take all of your time and effort and resources and just like dump it into playing with Renew. You already have a Revitalizing Prayers talent where your Prayer of Healing applies Renews. Your tier set is going to be having your Holy Words applying Renew. And there's a lot of gameplay around Epiphany where you're casting a Prayer of Mending, casting your Holy Word, resetting the cooldown of Prayer of Mending, casting another Prayer of Mending. And so I think that there's just this like good existing feedback loop that already is there, where you can feel comfortable casting Serenity or casting Sanctify, but certainly giving preference to casting Sanctify when it comes to this 4 set bonus. And you don't need to like hardcore play around all your gameplay. If you have nothing else to cast, you probably feel more comfortable about casting Renew, but you still want to be casting a lot of Prayer of Healings to give you more Sanctifies, because the Sanctifies still hit like trucks and still result in massive output. You also still want more Holy Words because you still want to get a good Holy Word Salvation. And you also have to balance out giving Holy Word cooldown reduction after a Salvation and then being able to spend them, because you're going to be able to spend crazy amounts of Holy Words if you salve the entire raid, but you also have to balance it out between not overstacking your new tier set bonus and making sure that you're using the Apotheosis uptime that you gained from Salvation to give you more Holy Word cooldown reduction so that you can be spending them for later, getting another Holy Word Salvation, and continuing to get good value there. So there's kind of a balancing act, and I'm really excited for Holy Priest because it also means that there's going to be more skill expression for the spec to play around Epiphany, to play around some of the procs of this new incoming 4-set. I'm actually really excited for what the future is going to hold for Holy, so it's going to be just a little less straightforward, or a little bit less of like, I will always play this the same way. There is going to be more skill expression that's going to be offered now that we have Epiphany, now that we have this 4-set coming into it, and honestly, I'm really excited. It's a little bit weird to be playing around Renew as a sort of modifier, and when I was just randomly renewing people in Orgrimmar, it didn't proc like crazy. So we'll have to see how this shapes up in tier sets, because it might need a little bit of a buff depending on how often it actually is going to be proccing when you get into like a full-fledged 20-man raid. Resto Druid, of course, is a crazy slew of changes. And of course, while this is not my usual area of expertise, they are adding a lot more of the updates and just improvements as well to Grove Guardian, sort of in general, spawning even more trees than ever before to be able to assist you on your way with your output. They also have been doing quite a bit to be able to rein in some of the larger cooldowns that Druid also has to offer, and notably bringing down some of the healing from like Swift Mend and Nourish, while bringing up regrowth healing by a lot with 20% initial healing and 42% with heal over time effects, while also increasing rejuve healing, wild growth healing, and then starting to bring down some of your other output, notably from like your tier set bonus. So it seems like they're sort of rolling in and almost like preparing Resto Druid for the loss of their current tier set and being able to sort of like transition them into the new one. Notably, they talk about how they're nerfing down Flourish from 6 seconds of extension, from 8 seconds of extended duration to 6 seconds. And then, of course, changing the rate of your heal over time effect increase to 25% instead of 100% on top of it. This notably is how they're sort of reducing the effectiveness of Flourish, increasing the power of rotational heal over time spells with the goal of moving power into the base kit. This is something that they addressed in the overall healing throughput, and where they talked about how group healing modifications, increasing total output, and the spells feeling that they're rapidly increasing a raid from damaged health to full. This seems really, really targeted at Resto Druid in particular, as they're sort of making all of these changes that they had on hand. And of course, they're sort of nerfing down the Aberis tier sets as well to be able to sort of compensate into this going forward. Now, like I mentioned, there's a lot more of the Grove Guardian, and again, like I said, Druid not being my expertise, kind of reminded me a lot of Fallen Order, and that's some of the comparisons that I've heard from other Resto Druid players, where you're just having your dudes out, and they're also just helping you heal all the time as you're already casting. Now, with the 2-set, having you and your Grove Guardians nourishes, healing 2 additional allies at 40% effectiveness, and clear casting, causing your regrowths to also cast Nourish onto a nearby ally at 200% effectiveness, preferring those with your healing over time effects. Curious to see how the injured ally effect would work, if it's how smart of healing that it would actually be on hand, since there's really very little. If it would also jump to a target, or it also stay on the target that is the most injured at that point in time. I'd be pretty interested to see with that. For Mistweaver Monk, there are buffs to Life Cocoon, of course, as they always need it. Kind of surprised that their Soothing Mist healing increased. Enveloping, I always love to be able to see. Misty Peaks, which I think is the Enveloping Mist proc chance, is then reduced. Enveloping Breath is healing 5 targets instead of 6. I think this is kind of a good change alongside the Sanctify, because you want to be able to balance around only healing 5 people, thanks to dungeon output. Invigorating Mist healing is increased, but it's reduced beyond 5 targets. And again, this is like a good change I think they should be making across the board for a lot of abilities, and balancing around how things scale past 5 targets. Burst of Life, it doubled in healing. I think that's the Cocoon Pop that you're going to be having, and so having an actual burst of healing onto your party seems great. Vivify's direct healing, I'm extremely excited about, being increased by 30%. I think that's probably one of the big things that I always noticed for a lot of expansions whenever I played Monk, was I always felt like Vivify just had to be hard dumping as many casts of it as possible, especially with how Monk's mana can be over time, where, yeah, it just feels kind of bad hardcore dumping Vivifies just to try to push up a health pool. So I'm excited for that, and same thing with single target healing for Holy Priest. When it comes to Ancient Teachings, they did increase the range, and Ancient Concordance is now 1 point to try to help some of the fist sweeping type stuff. Seems nice, but I would really love to see more changes for getting out of like the clouded focus, sort of like weird ramp type stuff, and I'm not quite sure if these changes are really going to make that happen. That's just my personal preference, though. But to see Renewing Mist and its jumps apply Harmony, increasing its target's healing taken from you by 50%, seems like a lot of fun, especially with the 15% of all healing you do to targets with Chi Harmony being stored and then dispersed evenly among your allies with Renewing Mist when Chi Harmony fades or is refreshed. Feels like it's going to be even stronger for 5-mans than anything else, and that's one area I've always really enjoyed playing my Monk. And honestly makes me want to like play my Monk again, even if it is just going to be like a 5-man type character, because especially when you're going to be able to get really strong effectiveness out of your spot healing and your Vivify, and really rewarded for maintaining your renew spread onto your allies for a long time, and rewarded for extending your enveloping mists onto your allies when they need even more healing, that really deeply excites me. So I'm very much hopeful for that to be improved quite a bit. When it comes to Shaman, of course, they are nerfing down some of the mana regen that is coming from Mana Spring, in accordance to them wanting to make mana matter a lot more for specs. Stream healing is getting increased by 20%, while Cloud Burst is getting nerfed. Instead of the 30% of accumulated healing, it's only going to be 20%. I haven't played my Shaman since the beginning of 10.1.5, but honestly, the days that I always really enjoyed playing my Shaman was when Cloud Burst was strong. Maybe I'm in the minority onto that. But it is nice to be able to see spot healing get a really nice awakening, with healing surge and wave getting increased by 30% apiece. But to compensate probably for those buffs, Primordial Wave replicates healing wave at 40% effectiveness instead of 60%. Ascendance is now duplicating 80% of healing done instead of 100%. This is kind of in line with what they were talking about by like reining in cooldowns, but it also seems kind of disproportional because I wasn't really seeing a lot of other healers' major cooldowns getting nerfed to compensate. Mana Tide's mana regen reduced from 100% to now 80%, and Resurgence, which is the chain heal crits, is also going to be restoring 20% less mana as well. So it seems like out of the healers we've been looking at, Shaman is getting their cooldowns nerfed down, their mana regen nerfed down, and doesn't look like they're getting a lot of love from their tier sets, where they're marking targets with a Tidal Reservoir when they cast Chain Heal, Surge, or Wave, causing them to receive 15% of all Riptide healing that you deal for 10 seconds. But they didn't do anything to buff Riptide? And one of the big reasons that like Riptide was feeling really strong, or the spec was feeling really strong, especially in a key environment when it dominated Shadowlands, was that Riptide actually did a lot of healing. Now Riptide's healing is increased, yeah, just by 15% on a 4 set. And if it's active on the same target as Tidal Reservoir, its heal over time effect has a 10% chance to create a new Riptide on a nearby ally. I think Shaman kind of comes out as one of the biggest losers of these class changes, where they weren't a dominant raid spec, they were far from a dominant M+ spec, and they were just kind of there. They were just kind of middling in a lot of different things that they were doing. Yeah, it's nice to have something like Spirit Link, but I don't think that like makes up in any sort of way for the lack of like overall output that gets brought to the table, and the lack of like super powerful cooldowns that a lot of other healers seem to have. It does, to me at least, look like Shaman was already in the back seat, already not a high performer, and then they're the ones who kind of get cracked down on from the burst output they could have for something like Cloud Burst, and then trying to, I guess, push you to something like Healing Stream, and then nerfing the mana benefits you're giving to your other healers, nerfing your overall output, and nerfing your personal mana too. It does really feel like Shaman's been the biggest loser throughout this, and so I hope, it's still early for them, but I really hope to see some other changes coming in to be able to help the Shaman players out, because I think that they might be the ones in the biggest need at the moment. Otherwise, if you've got any questions, we're going to be doing a whole bunch of 10.2 dungeon raid testing and everything like that to see what all of these healers have in store for us for the incoming patch. So make sure to sub to the YouTube channel, and of course to check out the live stream as well as we do all of the 10.2 testing. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll catch y'all next time.